musicians of the Duluth Superior Youth Symphony Orchestras. I hope you will find this video as good reminders of what we discussed during our Practice Well session. We will start with a Radetzky march. With this excerpt, I would like to address mainly about the bow arm. Bow distributions are always very important to figure out. It does not work simply to use the bow as it comes. When we are advancing to play more complex pieces of music, so do our bow distribution and usage planning. In this particular excerpt, we have longer as well as shorter strokes. There are also strokes that need to come off the string, as well as those that are light but do not exactly come off the string. Let's break down the bow distribution and usage. We need to make sure that we don't overuse nor underuse. The trick is if we have exactly the same thing back to back, for example, at the very start of this excerpt, it does not mean that you will use the bow exactly the same way. In fact, we have to have a long-range planning. We know where we want to be at the start of this passage and where we want to be at the third bar. So, this means that over the course of the two bars, we have to somehow get to closer to the frog, but closer to the frog does not mean at the frog. I've broken up the bow in roughly 4 parts, wrote in a rough guide for a bow placement, using numbers to correspond to where roughly the placement should be. For the strokes, we have those that must come off the string, like measure 3 of the first line and measures 2, 3, and 4 of the second line. And this actually goes for all parts, not just violin 1. Off the string means literally just that, and there must be a certain ring or resonance for each of the strokes. And after being off the string, slightly up in the air, we have to land gracefully onto the next stroke. It should not sound as if the bow is dropping onto the string and assaulting it, and it should come down on time. Then the other important stroke is the one that takes the pressure off slightly the string, but it doesn't actually come off. What this stroke does is to slightly taper off the sound at the end of the note, but it still retains a nice resonance. This stroke would also go for all the quarter notes with a dot for the violas as well all of the basses section in this passage. Finally, in this excerpt, all sections must listen well to the viola. For most of the passage, they have consistent beats. They serve as our heartbeat for the passage. For the next excerpt, we have something from the Scheherazade. For both violin sections, the intonation is incredibly difficult, and it is really important to make sure that the left hand becomes trained to be organized. What does that mean? First, it is really important to make sure that we place fingers in blocks. When each finger is placed for each note, one by one, it's like typing just with a single finger. You want to have an organized system, which means that certain fingers stay on without lifting. Also, Some fingers must be placed down over two strings as if in a fifth. I've attached a practice version for this particular passage. These etudes address the issue of organizing fingers by incorporating double stops and such, in the hopes that it becomes clear which fingers should be left on and also placed down as a fifth. When you practice this, please make sure that you write down your fingerings and don't change the fingerings when you practice these etudes and when you actually play the passage for real. Here's also the second violin version. Let's move on now to the viola excerpt. Since I don't any longer play the viola, I've asked my friend Mei Ching to take part here with me. We want to look at two different types of bow strokes. One, string crossing, and two, détaché. This particular string crossing goes over 3 strings. These string crossings must be smooth and even. How do we get this? Let's start by gauging how much bow you need for the string crossing stroke. The actual crossing has to be led from the lower arm. Then imagine drawing a half circle. Next, practice with open strings. So this particular string crossing requires double string crossings, not a single. From the G to the D, then to the A. Make sure it's all even. If you don't use the right amount of the bow, the sound won't be perfectly even either. Let's move on to talk about détaché now. This should be a bit easier than the string crossing we just had. This détaché is not only on a single string though. This means that you're going to have to find the correct arm position for each of the strings you are supposed to play. In cases like this, one often overreacts and the arm moves way too much. Now hear the complete excerpt.